People out here stealing authentic autograph slabs? Relics in wrestling cards still matter. Oh, and so do one-of-ones, just in case you didn't know, even if it's mid-card talent. And 2 cards from the 80s that are in high grades, a little bit unorthodox, and yet they're still bringing in really solid prices. This is the Wrestling Card Market Watch for January 2023. What's up, wrestling fans, trading card collectors? Welcome to another episode of Wrestling with Cards. And we've officially kicked off 2023 with the Wrestling Card Market Watch videos. Woohoo, here we are! January, just like all these other months, didn't let us down. And if this is your first time checking out the video today, welcome, thank you. Or if you're a day one-ish member to this channel, thanks for the continued support. Each month I do one of these videos looking back at some of the activity in the wrestling card hobby. I like to highlight some interesting sales, interesting cards, and talking points that I see that might fall through the cracks a little bit. So let's jump into it. On-card autos authenticated and slabbed for under $100. Very interesting stuff here. I feel like I'm seeing more and more of these kind of things. And what I'm talking about is cards that have autographs from wrestlers or sports or celebrities or whatever, and they're authenticated in a slab, but not graded. And we're seeing this through a few different grading companies. And I have 2 different points that I want to bring up about this. Number 1 is I think this is a fantastic buying opportunity. Remember what I said about stealing these cards? I think you could get some serious steals. A lot of these cards are very, very cheap depending on the card or the talent. And keep in mind, one reason that is because it's just authenticated. No grades on the card, no grades on the autos. But when you stop and think about it, here's why I think it's a steal. Whether it's a $1 card or a $5 or $10 card, when you take the price of the card that you could buy on eBay or buy on ComC or your local card shop, whatever it is, take the price of that card, take the price of the shipping that it will cost you to get the card if you bought it online, and then ship it to a grading company and have them ship it back. Also add in the fact that say you took this card to a wrestling convention or an indie show, had them sign it, paid the wrestler to sign that, the gas spent getting to the shows in the post office, not to mention the price you pay to get it authenticated and slabbed from the grading company. By the time you add all of that up, that may be costing more than $100 total. I don't know for sure, you'd have to know your margins, but finding some of these cards already slabbed, authenticated, signed, ready to go out the door for under $100 seems like a good deal to me. I just think sometimes it makes more financial sense to buy a card like this than to do it yourself and go get it done in person and then do the grading, authenticating through those companies yourself. Now, I understand by doing that, you're losing that in-person experience that you normally would get by having that card signed in front of the superstar and then doing it yourself. But again, I'm just talking strictly from financial perspective here. Also, if you're digging through these authenticated only wrestling card autos, I think it's a great opportunity to try to get some autos of deceased wrestlers or wrestlers who just aren't signing anymore. Lots of opportunity there. The other point I wanted to talk about is actually the flip side of this, and the thing that I think is, yeah, I said it's a steal. I also think this could be a really good money-making opportunity to flip some cards to build your PC. Again, you have to be aware of your margins, and you have to have a little bit of business sense to do this. You can't just go out there doing these things willy-nilly. But if you can get a good deal on bulk-based cards or something that's cheap, and you go to a lot of conventions and signings, you could send them in for authentication only. I can speak on this personally with PSA. I've done this where I've had a card that I know they won't grade, but I know that they will authenticate the auto. So I'll send it in, and you can always typically get it cheaper than it would be if you had to grade it and grade the auto. So if you do all this, you get them back from PSA or whatever grading company you're using, and you price them competitively, I think it's a huge opportunity. Not to mention, we know as wrestling card collectors, everybody loves on-card autos. We're sick of stickers. So again, if you were doing this and you weren't getting really greedy on the prices, lots of money to be made, I think. 2002 Fleer All Access, Kurt Angle and The Rock Dual Auto, $203.50 with $5 shipping. I feel like the sentiment, especially more in the ultra-modern space of collectors coming in, is that wrestling card relics, no one cares. But you have to stop and realize we do have some outliers. I mean, we've got collectors like Doug Driesel Jr., who is trying to put together so many wrestling ring mat relics to lay out and form a regulation size WWF ring. And if you missed my conversation with Doug about that PC that he's building, you can go check that out in the archives on this channel. But you also have to stop and look at some of the relics that actually stand out. For example, the 1999 Topps WCW embossed ringside rarity Hulk Hogan relic. To my knowledge, that is the first wrestling card relic of any kind ever made in a card. You also have some really awesome stuff that Panini has put out lately. More importantly, stuff like the Logo Man that they've put out. But in my opinion, when most people think of wrestling card relic cards that really matter, they're always going back to Fleer. Fleer always had really awesome and different ways to do relics that even to this day still aren't being topped. And this card is an exact example of that. A milk carton used by Kurt Angle, still something that hasn't been done to this day. Not to mention you add in a shirt relic of The Rock now. I know, it's a black swatch, we see those all the time, but it's The Rock, right? And he wore the shirt. How do we know that? Because look at the back of the card. That's something that Fleer did really well, is they specified what it was you were getting in your card. It truly was an authentic piece of relic, as opposed to what Panini says a lot of times, where maybe it's player worn, maybe it's not associated with any wrestler or player to begin with, and it's just off the rack from Dick's Sporting Goods or WWE Shop t-shirt that nobody actually wore, they just put it in a card. With Fleer, you knew what you were getting. With a lot of more modern releases, you might not actually be getting what you think you're getting in that card. And on top of that, with this card, I think it's a great image. You've got Kurt clocking The Rock with the belt, and Rock's making a really interesting pose in the moment. Triple whammy of awesomeness with this card. As I stated before, Fleer cards, specifically the relics and some of the autos, are really sought after. People go back and they talk about the classic stuff like the Farouk knee brace or the Hurricane mask card. And in my opinion, when you've got a brand that put out wrestling cards 20 years ago and people are still talking about it and paying really good prices for them, in my opinion, I'd consider what Fleer did a total success when it comes to wrestling. And you might even have to start thinking about Fleer relic cards being in that upper echelon of iconic wrestling card sets. 2022 WWE Select Sheamus Ringside Black 1 of 1, $222.50 with $9.99 shipping. A few episodes back on my personal podcast, the Wrestling with Cards podcast, which you could go check out anywhere you get regular podcasts from, I brought up the question, are one-of-ones really that rare? When you have so many products produced, and there's one-of-ones and variations of one-of-ones in each of those products, you have to stop and think, okay, if there's 59 one-of-ones, is it really that rare? Is it really that collectible? Do people care? Is it sought after? And honestly, I think this sale reaffirms that question that yes, they do matter. And here's why. For specific brands and sets, the one-of-ones in those are always going to be sought after. And what I mean is, look at this card specifically. You got Sheamus. It's Sheamus. A guy that, no disrespect, but doesn't have a huge collector base. And I think by many is kind of viewed more as a mid-card wrestler. Now, I know he's won WWE titles before, but when you think of Sheamus, he's been around forever. Most people kind of see him as a mid-card guy. Yet you have his one-of-one ringside here selling for over $200. That's pretty awesome if you ask me, and it gets me really excited for a couple of reasons. First off, as I mentioned before on previous podcasts and videos, this really reaffirms that people are starting to collect other wrestlers. And what I mean is they're not just going after the Hogans. They're not just going after The Rock, Roman Reigns, MJF. They're going after lower tier talent. They're picking out Japanese indie stars. And I just think it's awesome that we're getting more PCs and super collectors built out of talent that does matter in the grand scheme of wrestling, but maybe just isn't at that hobby love level yet. And I know maybe they're not bringing in the prices of some of those other really popular names, but cards like this are transacting more and more, and I love seeing it. I think another important thing to talk about is set collecting and kind of the rise that I've seen of people doing sets. Now, I'm not talking about master sets, I'm not talking necessarily about base sets, but maybe there's collectors out there that I've seen that are picking things out of Chronicles that Panini just put out. Or maybe they're just trying to put together, maybe the buyer for this wanted the ringside one-of-ones. Maybe they're trying to get all those one-of-ones. You know, that's an interesting way to put together a set. So it's most of the time like parallel sets, subsets, insert sets, not so much base sets. But the fact that people are doing this, I think, is really encouraging from a market perspective, but really just awesome and fun to see. I love seeing this stuff on Instagram and Twitter. People are sharing out their entire insert sets or color match sets all laid out. It's just very cool. And again, anytime you can do that, anytime you can put a fresh perspective out there for maybe people who aren't in the wrestling card hobby yet, maybe they're tired of seeing, All-Stars, they're tired of seeing Prism. Well, maybe there's a Chronicles subset that they can put together. Maybe it's their favorite wrestler from Japan. Just, again, these fresh perspectives that collectors are doing, I think is just going to further grow our collector base as a whole within wrestling cards, and ultimately, that's what it's all about. 1982 Wrestling All-Stars, Series B, Rick Martel, PSA 8, we actually had 2 sales in the same day of the same card in the same grade. $3,150 and then $3,200. Okay, sure, it's Wrestling All-Stars. Everybody knows about these. And I know there's a segment of people who would just assume myself and any others out there that are into this set never speak about them again. And that's for numerous reasons that I probably don't need to get into here. But I might be a little bit biased because this is my favorite wrestling card set of all time. And that's okay if you don't like this. You don't have to agree with me that it's even a good set. Maybe this is like the lowest tier. Maybe you like 1990 Classic better than this. And that's okay. Again, everybody can have their opinions as long as we're all collecting and having conversations about stuff like this. I think it's great. But for this set specifically, I think collectors need to recognize how important it is on the grand scheme of things and kind of what it represents to the broader wrestling card hobby. Cards from this set, no matter who it is, they always seem to find their way into these market talk videos or just general discussions about high-grade cards, vintage, and markets. But when we talk about those cards, we're not really usually talking about Rick Martel, and here we have 2 sales in the same day of the same card within the same price range. Very interesting in my opinion. Rick Martel in general just doesn't get talked about a lot in wrestling cards, but also just wrestling in general. Very popular. People remember him from the 80s, just don't talk about him very much. According to the PSA Pop Report, we have 5 Rick Martel PSA 8s, 1 9, and no 10s. So you have a total of 6 cards that are PSA 8 or higher. That's it, only 6. And 2 of them in the same grade sold in the same day. That in itself explains why this card sold for so much, even twice on the same day. It has a lot to do with registries. When you have low pops like this and you have people out there trying to complete those set registries to compete with everybody else that's building those sets as well, and they've got to have the highest grade possible, they will pay whatever it is for a card that might not seem as important, but if it's a higher grade, then that matters to them. But let me take a second to layer on an additional talking point with this card. Autographs. Getting the Wrestling All-Star set autographs is something a lot of people have been doing, myself personally. My Wrestling All-Star set, I don't care as much about the grade, but I'm trying to get all the autographs that I can. And it may seem like there's a lot of people out there doing it, like I said, but when you stop and you start considering how many may actually be autographed compared to non-autographed, it's probably even more rare than some of these pop reports that are out there. And a lot of that is due for this set specifically because a lot of these wrestlers have passed away or don't sign anymore, or maybe in some cases they are alive and they're charging a ridiculous price to have these specific cards signed. It's just interesting when you look at it because this set has 2 styles of collectors. There's the people that have to go after the highest grades possible, building out those registries, trying to compete. There's another crew of people collecting these like myself who are just trying to get the autographs, get those graded, authenticated, and whatever they come out number-wise is what they come out. And then I think there's some people that probably kind of dabble in both worlds a little bit. Maybe they go after the highest grade possible with an autograph, but they're not trying to get the whole set. Either way, the demand for this set continues to push forward on all different angles of it. But as I said before, I completely understand why this set, it's not for everybody. 1988 Georgia Bulldogs McDab, Bill Goldberg, rookie card, PSA 10, $2,500 with $17.75 shipping. Goldberg is definitely a guy that seems to be a lot more popular in the wrestling world as opposed to the wrestling card world. And as we know, those are 2 drastically different spaces, unfortunately. I wish a lot of wrestling fans would start collecting cards and wrestling card collectors would get more into modern wrestling product. But we've had that discussion so many times, and maybe we do it again, but not for this show right now. So again, Goldberg cards. Needless to say, they don't get talked about a lot unless it's a key card in a key set that a lot of people want or are collecting. But let's talk about this card specifically. It's very reminiscent of the Rock Bumblebee football card that we talked about in the last Market Watch video. Again, if there's something you've heard me reference on any of these videos and you're not sure what I'm talking about, make sure to check out the videos in the archive on this channel. A lot of that would kind of get you caught up to speed on some of the references I'm making. But I want to bring this question to you, the viewers. Is this really a rookie card similar to the Rock's football card? It's not wrestling. Does that opinion even matter? Does it being a rookie card even... Who cares? Honestly, I'm not sure. We have the rules that Beckett defines as pack-pulled, widely distributed rookie cards. Wrestling operates in a different realm than that, and the market kind of goes one way or another depending on the time. So again, I'm not really sure, but I'd love to hear your opinion on this whole debate. I normally don't like to talk about rookie cards, but, you know, to my knowledge, this is Goldberg's first appearance on cardboard of any form. So in my opinion, first appearance sometimes means rookie card, sometimes it doesn't, depending on the market. Again, I've referenced like the 52 mantle, like people call that a rookie card, even though it's not a rookie card, it came out after. And that happens a lot with wrestling. But again, I just would like your opinion. So if you have an opinion on this, leave a comment below and let's get a discussion started. But similar to the Rock football card, this is a product that wasn't nationally distributed. So it is a first appearance card. It's not widely distributed. And regardless of if they're graded, not graded, high grades or low grades, you just don't see this card pop up very often. But the main thing that I want to talk about on this card is conviction. What does conviction have to do with this video, anything I'm doing, this card? Why did I say that? Well, I remember a few years back seeing this card in a PSA 10 grade, and I think it was like between $100 and $200. And I passed on it for whatever reason. Not the biggest Goldberg fan, but I did enjoy his time in WCW. I thought it was a pretty fairly priced card. But I was probably at that time going after cross stuff or buying, autographed passes at conventions so I could get those All-Stars cards signed that I was talking about. Just other things that were higher in my priority list. But now look at this card. This card has 25x'd its original price. In just a few years, and even in a hobby time where the markets are all down, yet this one accumulated value of 25x. You just can't say that about a lot of cards in general, no matter if it's wrestling or sports or non-sport. But obviously, somebody had conviction on this card on that original purchase. Someone understood that this could be an important card down the road. You had the initial obtainer of the card, whether they got it from the Georgia football game or team or however this was distributed. Then you had them, they're thinking this could be worth something. They probably sold it for like $10 and were like, hey, I made a ton. But then you had the person who bought the card thinking, I can grade this and add even more value, and down the road when wrestling cards explode, this is going to be even more popular. And then you had the conviction on the third party involved that paid $2,500+ to get this card in a PSA 10. Maybe it's a Goldberg Super Collector. Maybe it's somebody building out this Georgia football set. Maybe they just have conviction. I say all that to say this. If you ever have an opportunity and you see a card, you think it's awesome, and it's within your price range, and it's something that you don't see come up a lot, you should jump on it. Don't be like me and be skeptical on cards. Now, I am skeptical on certain cards at certain prices, like I said, but again, it's about conviction. What conviction do you have? When you're on eBay, when you're going to Golden Auctions, when you're at a card show or a LCS, if you see that card and, again, you've never seen it before, it seems reasonably priced, pick it up. What do you think about the cards and the talking points that I brought up in today's video? I'd love to hear your feedback. Leave a comment below and let me know what is something I spoke about today that really helped you out, what's something I was wrong on, what's something that we could further discuss about something that was talked about today. If this video brought you some value, please hit that subscribe button. Give me a like, and tell a friend about the show. Spread the word about Wrestling with Cards on YouTube and on the podcast. And as always, before you get out of here, when you're down there leaving a comment on what you thought about today's episode, make sure to check the links in the show notes below for all of the ways that you can help show your support for my content. The podcast links are down there, my eBay store, Patreon, links to my social platforms, and much more. But until next time, click the videos on the screen wherever they are for more great wrestling card content in the archives. We'll see you.